All right, welcome back. And of course, one of Trinidad and Tobago's top attorney, and his name calls very often. Of course, he is the Tobago Business Chairman, the Tobago Business Chairman, or Chamber of Tobago Business. Yes. Good morning, and Mr. Martin George. Welcome to you, sir.
Good morning to you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to all of Tobago. And then I will say Happy New Year to all of Trinidad.
Very good. Tobago first.
I must get my priorities right.
Exactly. All right. But, you know, when we were trying to get you for the longest while, and when my producer, Nana, said to me, Martin George, come in, I said, just I want him on set so we can really have a deep conversation. Let's go back to, we'll start with the crisis that we had to endure. And of course, there was a number of, with the ferry crisis. You made your suggestion as to what should be done, and you still hold dear to that alternative travel to Trinidad. But let's deal from the crisis to where we are now. Obviously, we have one new ferry. One commentator said, why should Trinidad and Tobago be enduring service, and why not the private sector? I think it was the Downtown Merchants Association Duma president there, Aboud, saying that should be handed over to the private sector. In St. Vincent, there's an example of the ferry running between Canwan, Bequia, and all of that, run by private individuals. From that, in that holistic preamble, I want you to give me a perspective as where your mind is now in terms of the ferry service.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I have no difficulty with Mr. Aboud making this suggestion, if he did so, in relation to it being handed over to the private sector. But maybe he is saying that with a plan in mind, if you understand me. You know, but the fundamental concern for Tobagonians, and we must understand the difference. Tobagonians use the inter-island travel either by ferry or by plane, mainly out of necessity. Trinidadians use it mainly for leisure and pleasure activities. So in other words, there's a fundamental difference. In other words, it's like, you know, when you're growing up, they teach you to separate the difference between your needs and your wants. Good. For Tobagonians, it's a need.
Yeah.
For most Trinidadians, it's a want. So I want to go to Tobago for a weekend. So therefore, you also have flexibility. You have, you know, it's not an urgent thing. But if you have a sick child who has to see a specialist in Trinidad, and you have a fixed appointment, which you've waited months to get, and it's a fixed date and time, when you go to the airport, if there are no flights running, or if the flights are delayed, and your child runs the risk of not getting to see that specialist for this treatment that she needs, then you understand the fundamental difference it is for Tobagonians as opposed to Trinidadians. So therefore, while it may be good if the private sector does get involved also, we must never relieve the government of its responsibility to provide for Tobago in this regard. And I'll tell you, I've always used a very simple example. I've said, can you imagine if you're living in San Fernando, you're living in Princestown, Mayaro, and you are totally cut off from getting to Port of Spain. You will see people burning tires, rioting in the streets in Trinidad because they will say, hey, the government is not doing their job. They're not allowing us to be able to get to Port. Just a simple thing as that. So it's essentially the same thing for Tobago, because in other words, if you don't have a reliable ferry service or reliable airplane service running between the islands that you can depend on, then you are cut off. Because the thing is, most of the goods, services, the specialist, you know, treatments that you may need are all in Trinidad. So we need to always look at it from that context. So while we have no difficulty with private sector involvement, we must never remove that responsibility, because I've heard people make this spurious and specious and speculative argument that, well, why people in the private sector keep complaining, why don't they take on the mantle of running this? This is not, first of all, it's not something that could ever be done without government intervention. Because when you're talking about the maritime laws, you're talking about the requirements internationally, you're talking about having your reinsurers, Lloyds, and all these people coming to certify your vessels. So you always have that type of governmental intervention that is needed, even if a private sector entity was running the service.
All right, Mr. George, I have to ask you now, so we're going to shift. Are you satisfied with what is happening now for the ferry service? We have two fast ferries, more or less, operating the John de la Valette, doing a fantastic job as far as all comments are concerned. You have the Kobo Star doing the cargo, and are you, from the chamber standpoint? From
a business perspective, it definitely is an improvement, where I will tell you that the Port Authority needs to get better customer service is a few things. Number one, the online booking system, right? That usually is not as real time as it should be. In other words, sometimes you go online, and if you want to book, say for instance 3 weeks in advance, it's not even up yet that you could even make that type of booking. So they need to improve definitely on their online booking system. Not all the vessels are available for the online booking system, so that's another thing. I've also said, even in terms of their facilities at the ports, Scarborough and Port of Spain, they need to improve it in terms of their customer service delivery. This is something I spoke personally to the Works Minister, Mr. Sinanan, about. He said that it's going to become a priority for them. I haven't seen it yet. So I will call again upon Minister Sinanan. Please get the message to the people at the Port Authority. When you get there, you're supposed to be able, first of all, you should have like free Wi-Fi access. You're supposed to have a proper cafeteria where you could have a proper meal. You're supposed to be able to relax and, some sort of convenience while they may have their delays. You understand that, but then don't make me suffer while I'm waiting.
Okay, fine.
These are some of the things that they can improve upon.
About another thing, that the transport to Trinidad, people using the ferry, and you said it is very important. Well, this is a need that Tobagonians have to go to Trinidad. Mr. George, what grieves me is that nobody spoke about when Mr. Sinanan and the government decided to construct the walkover down for the San Fernando pedestrians after they come off the ferry to cross safely. Meanwhile, the Tobagonian has to still risk their lives crossing immediately after they come off the ferry. And the argument is that they can walk down, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's about what, maybe more than, I don't want to get in terms of measurement, from there to where the walkover is. Nobody has spoken about that. Nobody has addressed that. Recently, I was in Trinidad. I see people still risking their lives crossing that treacherous crossing. What do you want to say to that from a business and a Tobago voice who makes the world listens when he speaks?
The thing is, you see, it's one of the issues, but I'll tell you, there are many more things that we need to consider. In other words, I'll tell you something. I have said repeatedly, look at that whole stretch. Okay, say for instance, from say Burnett Hill, the bottom of Burnett Hill, coming all the way down.
Port of Spain.
Oh, you're talking Port of Spain. Right, in Port of Spain. Yes. Oh yes, that is a definite need. I agree with you. And I know what they're saying. They're saying to walk down and use the one that is facilitating
for the San Fernando
ferry and the financial complex. Yes, I understand you.
Yeah.
So yes, that's an issue. But I was talking in terms of Scarborough.
Okay.
And let's look at that whole waterfront area. Do we understand the value of what we have there? That waterfront is such a gem if it is properly managed and exploited. In other words, I'll tell you, all over the world, let me tell you, waterfront properties are always the most valuable properties. We have a beautiful stretch. When you look out, you see the ocean, you see how nice it looks from there, you see another side of Bacalet, that kind of thing. That entire stretch, and this is something I will call upon Tobagonians to think of and buy into the idea, that entire stretch will be the hub of your tourist activity. Right now, the main hub is down Crown Point. But I'll tell you, Scarborough can be redeveloped and revitalized in such a beautiful way. First of all, you need to basically pedestrianize that whole area, right? You develop some nice cobblestone streets, right? You start focusing on the historic buildings, because we have a tendency just to pull them down and tear them down, right? Then you start developing some restaurants, pubs. But trust me, when the cruise ship comes in, the people, they will spend all their money right
in Scarborough,
right
if it's developed the right way.
Because you see that in all the ports. When you go Cancun, right, you go all these other places, Cozumel, right, you go all these other ports, even St. Kitts. You wouldn't believe St. Kitts has a beautiful little cruise ship port. Beautiful. And St. Kitts is a tiny island.
Yes.
St. Lucia, all these places. Well, don't even talk about Jamaica, right? Like when you go Montego Bay, and you go those areas like Margaritaville and stuff like that. All the money is spent there because there are things for people to do. What does a visitor do when they land in Scarborough if they haven't pre-booked one of these tours? And even that is a problem, because I'll tell you, I don't like to just talk about things. I actually booked a cruise that stopped in Tobago. So in other words, I had the experience.
You were just in your own home.
So I wasn't just talking about it. I experienced it. And I'll tell you, for starters, when you look at the itinerary on the cruise ship in terms of where you stop at the different ports, you had pages and pages for Barbados, for Antigua, for St. Kitts, for St. Lucia, pages of what you can do. Tobago was one paragraph, not even a page, one paragraph.
Wow.
So that's to tell you. So in other words, while we are glad to say, yes, we recently had 2 cruise ships and, lots of people came off, the question is, what are they doing with their money? In other words, they come off with all their money.
To spend and nothing to spend.
They go back with all their money and they say, okay, all right, well, we went to Tobago. So you see, we need to understand what tourism is about. And you remember the definition I've always given of tourism. Tourism, and I mean, I would love to share this idea with Miss Nadine Stewart, who is our Secretary for Tourism. I would love to discuss some of these ideas with her.
Of course.
Tourism is a way of pleasantly separating a visitor from his money in a way that he enjoys it so much, he comes back again. And he comes back again. And he will tell all his friends, come back there, because I had such a great time in that island.
Mr. George, I hope that you have that conversation so we can get all the ideas so as to better our condition in terms of how we move forward. All right, let's deal with one of the things that I called out for, or I adamantly argued or asked why, is the chamber, both chambers are not vocal on this money exchange. I want to just you to give me a perspective at your position and where you were in your thinking when this money exchange happened. And it has to do with Tobago's development, as that what we are discussing. There was no voice except when I mentioned it here. Afterwards, I heard Watson said that Tobago business people, and this is where the business chamber was very silent. We didn't hear anything until he said, what happened to the business people? They have to make their way down to Central Bank in Trinidad. After which somebody responded and said, okay, let's bring the services to Tobago. Where were you at that time? Why wasn't you vocal on that matter?
Oh, well, I was out of the country, but separate and apart from that, I'll tell you, my take on this entire thing is that I am yet to fathom or understand the government's real rationale for this move. Because first of all, the timing of it seemed most inappropriate. The thinking and ideology behind it also seemed not to be accurate, because if one considers in India, all right, a country with more than 1 billion people, where they tried the same thing in 2016. If you remember, Prime Minister Modi did the same thing, just came as a surprise to everybody. Oh, we're changing the currency. And he also gave the same reason. He said that there's too much dirty money and, to stop money laundering, etc., etc. And it was a spectacular failure. All it ended up in is a whole lot of chaos, confusion, disruption of business. And in India, the result was 99.5% of all the old notes came back in. So who did you really stop? What was the real purpose? Apart from the recent issue with the religious minister,
So let's talk
there's nothing else that you have heard or seen that the government can say, well, look, this has been a success in that regard. So you ask yourself, why was all of this headache created for citizens? And I'll tell you, consider that we introduced a polymer $50 note
prior
years ago with none of this drama and all this fanfare. So what was really the purpose? So that's why, at the end of the day, I've been trying to, reason it out, trying to figure out what is the real intention, because what has been said or put out there to the public, it's not adding up as far as the results thus far.
When we come back, and of course your take on that is, and we deal with that separately in terms of what does it mean for the economy. Obviously, obviously we'll factor in the marijuana new decriminalizing of marijuana and to what it can do should we legalize it generally as opposed to where it is presently, and how can it benefit the economy and Tobago in general.
Sure.
So when we come back, we continue our conversation with Mr. Martin George. I tell you, of course, Tobago's Business Chamber Chairman. See you after the break.
Celebrates 25 years of serving the eye care needs of our nation with our Jubilee Frame Festival 2019. The biggest eyewear event in TNT features 5 internationally renowned brands including Ray-Ban, CK, and Kate Spade with a whopping 25% off complete spectacles plus added incentives at select stores. Give your eyes a fabulous look this season. See press and social media for full details. Value Optical, caring for your eyes.
At CFY Convenience Store, we stock a range of medical supplies, cosmetics, toiletries, gift items, stationery, and phone cards. Come check us out. We're now open and ready to serve you. We're located at Vending Booth 4, Scarborough General Hospital, Signal Hill. We are open from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Contact us at 239-3123 or on Facebook at CFY Tobago. CFY, convenient for you.
Trust me, this is a sure thing. Everyone is getting in now. There are only a few spaces left. Minimum investment, maximum yield. So you have to move fast. There is virtually no risk. It's the chance of a lifetime, just awaiting approval. It will double your investment in no time. Keep it on the down low though. Guaranteed returns with little effort. It best.
A scam artist can be anyone, anywhere. Do your research and ensure the investment is registered. Don't lose your hard-earned money. Think before you invest. Beat investment fraud. This is a message from the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission.
Looking for deck pans? No more trips to Trinidad for deck pans. Richard's Hardware is now manufacturing deck pans right here in Tobago. Cut to any length and same-day delivery. We also supply premixed concrete for residential and commercial use. Line pump and boom pump available. Also in stock. Pressure-treated lumber, Bestcrete concrete blocks, hollow clay blocks, BRC, steel, sand, gravel, and all other hardware supply. Corner Milford Road and Orange Hill. Or call us at 310-1289, 635-0169 or 683-8250. We meet all your needs at the lowest prices.
Carry on, carry on. Wind it up, wind it up, wind it up. And when I shake it up, I shake it up, I shake it up. Oh, you like that, yeah. And when you bend it up, you bend it up, you bend it up.
All right, welcome back as we continue our conversation with Attorney at Law, Mr. Martin George, of course, Tobago Business Chamber Chairman. And of course, we are dealing with Tobago's development. And, you know, from a national standpoint, we touched on a number of issues nationally and so on. But we just want to wrap up with that whole question of this money change. And let's tie it in with the marijuana.
Decriminalization.
Decriminalizing of marijuana. What does that mean, Mr. George? Now, of course, there's one argument that is it 4 marijuana trees per household or is it 4 marijuana trees per individual? So if you, I, and maybe 4 other people, we each can, I want you to explain this as attorney and of course what it means to the general public. Is it an intent so that we can earn? Is it an intent to stop the murder rate? And how does that factor into our economy?
Right. The thing is, I'll tell you, what we are witnessing is essentially governance by VAPs. Sorry to say.
All right.
Okay? And it's a reality. If you recall, on the way to the Parliament, the Honorable Prime Minister was approached some time ago by a marijuana activist. All right? She was brushed off, and she made a big fuss about that in the media. Then, on a subsequent occasion, he was approached by her again, and then he indicated, well, look, yes, we will deal with this. At that time, I was interviewed on a radio station, and I said, listen, if you are talking about marijuana legislation, you need, first of all, to define what are your aims and objectives. This is not something you go into without a plan. In other words, you look at places that have done it, they have done it with specific intentions. If it is that you want to develop a medical marijuana industry,
okay,
all right, as Jamaica has done, then now you ensure, first of all, that you focus on the types, that they have the correct content of THC. You ensure that, look, you put things in place so that you now manage how it's grown, how it's harvested, everything. That's the way governance works. It doesn't occur by way of you just waking up one morning and deciding, well, okay, look, almost as if, well, this person is harassing me, so all right, okay, let's go ahead with it. You don't function that way. Then you're hearing all sorts of different explanations from the government as to their reasons. They want to reduce the backlog of cases in the courts. They want to reduce the number of persons in prison and stuff like that. That is something you don't do just by way of, a knee-jerk reaction. You must have a holistic plan for it, right? And then you're talking about 4 plans per household. What is your objective? What are you trying to achieve? They cannot give you any proper explanation for it, except the fact that it appears, to be something that is popular now, so therefore, you jump on the bandwagon. But that's not what we require of our leaders. We require them to have proper long-term planning so that people can see the benefits, and therefore we can now say, well, look, we're on board with you because we understand where you're going. And I'll tell you, another example I'll give you of why I'm particularly disappointed in this regard. When you look at, for instance, the closure of Petrotrin and the way it was mismanaged, and I make no apologies for saying that because it was totally mismanaged. That is something that never needed to occur in that way. Look at what we have. We have Guyana next door. If you as the government decide, well, look, Petrotrin is a burden on the treasury and we want to, downsize, scale down, whatever, close down, it doesn't matter. Then you have a government-to-government discussion and arrangement with Guyana, and you say, hey, listen, you are now getting into this industry. We have all the skilled people here. We have 5,000, 4,000, how much ever persons. We have all the personnel you need. We are part of CARICOM. You make that arrangement. So therefore, all these people now would be able to automatically fill positions in Guyana. You ease the strain, you ease the pressure, you ease the burden. So in other words, people are not going on the bread line. And you just closing down with no plan. That is what responsible government is about. In other words, I take the lead and I say, listen, all right, you all are a strain on our treasury. However, I have made alternative arrangements. I've spoken with the government of Guyana, all the tool pushers, all the drillers, all the rig men, we have places for you all. Guyana is going to take you. Absolutely. And therefore, you now ensure that these people, because once they're working in a different country, they will now be earning in US currency. Yeah. They will be able to send back money to make sure their families, therefore you ensure that there's no risk of people saying, well, look, because of unemployment, crime is going to increase. So that's how you manage things, and that's what we require of governance. All right. It can't just be that you function in a vai manner.
All right. Okay. So Petrotrin came in not really planned, but however, as you mentioned it. But I want to get from you, and given the example, Canada has, and dealing with the marijuana issue.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Canada has legalized marijuana across the board. Right. They are earning what they are earning. They have the medicinal. They have the and so on. Right. So I want to bring the perspective into where can we go from here with this decriminalizing. There are some restrictions still, and of course there's no we haven't heard of how the government intend to earn. Should there be legalizing of marijuana in general and focus on how we can earn from this industry? Because clearly Jamaica, Canada, and parts of Europe has gone, and they are making money with marijuana.
This is the point.
Give me a perspective from a business standpoint.
Right, and this is what I'm saying. This is what the government should have started off with. In other words, they should have had this as their plan, their blueprint, as this is what we want to do, because there's tremendous potential. Because Barbados is now looking to get into it, and they have started that way. They said, listen, we are looking at it from the medicinal aspect. So therefore, there's tremendous potential, and I would like to see our government take that kind of initiative and say, this is where we're going. But as I say, what we've had is a hodgepodge, patch approach to it, just simply because it's sophisticated and sexy to talk about, you know, oh, well, we are liberalizing our stance in terms of marijuana. But the thing is, we require a whole lot more than that when you're talking about leadership and governance.
Let's talk, and let's go now to my another point about Tobago's and its moving forward, its development. Leadership. Presently, there's internal election campaign going on in the PNM Tobago. Obviously, we've had Joel Jack, who is Deputy Chief Secretary, and has challenged the very Chief Secretary that he's under. So in your interpretation, as an attorney, as a mind who is very open and so on, what does that mean for Tobago's leadership? Does it question what we have presently? Where do you see this going? And whose responsibilities, or who, in your mind, should take up the leadership to chart the future for Tobago? You talk about tourism and other sectors. From that standpoint, this internal election, where do you see it taking Tobago, and what should be done as opposed to what is being done now?
Right. Well, the thing is, I mean, I have always been the type of person, I don't always just take things at face value. So when I see something like, for instance, Mr. Jack as deputy throwing his hat in the ring, I would then question, is it that he is throwing his hat in the ring as opposed to the current Chief Secretary, or is it that his hat has been thrown into the ring to muddy the waters and dilute the votes of the other aspirants for the leadership post?
Okay.
So in other words, I will always ask myself these questions. I don't just take things at face value. So in other words, is it that this is part of a greater plan to ensure that the incumbent remains by you now diluting the votes of the other contenders for the post? I will ask that question. Whether you like me asking the question or not, I will ask that question because I always look beneath the surface. I don't take things at face value. So there's that. Secondly, if it is that it's a genuine contest whereby he is genuinely contending for the leadership, then of course that's good for our democracy if it is that persons are free to say, hey, listen, I have served under a leader, however, I think that I can offer you a bit more, and I'm free to join the fray and offer you my position while still saying, look, I respect the leadership style that has taken place in the past, but I'm offering an alternative. So that's good for democracy. But if it is that that's not the reason, and it is the first scenario that I postulated, then I think people need to look at it, you know, a little more, you know, a little closer, look at it a little closer, to understand whether there's a subplot taking place in the whole scenario.
You're good. So you sit down and watch plays and watch movie and decipher the plot coming, given that you look under the surface. So you don't make out what happened there already.
I try to analyze. That's the whole purpose of this type of show. And that's why I always compliment you all for these types of discussions. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to stimulate the minds of Tobagonians to think a bit more, assess things a bit more, analyze a little deeper than just taking things at face value.
Very good. All right, let's go to some credibility issues nationally, and we'll tie them with the Tobago upcoming election, well, the general election, and the whole question of, let's take Tobago East. There was a political analyst who were here on this set, Mr. Mohammed, and he spoke to the Tobago East seat, contested heavily by Watson Duke PDP. Watson Duke will be the representative going there according to what the PDP is saying, and he's going up against Webster Roy for the PNM. I want you to tell me, and this conversation is treating with Tobago's development, and leadership is critical for its development. Do you see, and give me a perspective as to the two contenders as what they can offer. Obviously, Watson is charismatic. He say, I swim to Trinidad and jump in the water and did it. The people love that, and he's loved by the people because of his style of politics. It's unorthodox, and he brings something different. Put that comparison to a Webster Roy going up against him for the leadership of, or for the representative for Tobago East. Give me a perspective.
Okay, well, the first two analyses you look at is that, one, the PNM has structure, mechanism, mobilization, and they have their foot soldiers. So at the end of the day, remember, your elections are won or lost by the number of persons who actually come out to vote for you. That mechanism PNM has. So they have a significant advantage there fundamentally. The PDP, on the other hand, they are still a fledgling party. They have not developed their structure and mechanisms to that level as yet, so therefore they will be playing catch up in that regard. But there's a plus to being a fledgling party in that you are a new voice, a new face. You come basically as a disruptor. Okay, so therefore you looking to change the paradigm, and that is attractive to people, more particularly the young persons who feel, well, look, we need a change. So therefore that is certainly in Mr. Duke's favor. But again, I throw out this question to Tobagonians. Is this really what Mr. Duke wants? Does he really want to win that Tobago East seat?
Why would you ask that?
And the reason why I ask that is, what's the long game? What's the objective? Because I always analyze and assess and ask questions about these things. In other words, what does winning that Tobago East seat do for Mr. Duke if he's not able to parlay that and ensure that he could leverage that to end up leading the central government of Trinidad and Tobago? In other words, unless you end up with a scenario where you have, say for instance, a 2021, and therefore, like James' son Mitchell did in St. Vincent, my one is greater than your 20 and you're 20, so therefore I will be leader. Unless you have that ability, and unless a scenario like that plays out, where you are now able to leverage that seat to ensure you get leadership, where does it leave you? What do you do?
But is
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. It's very interesting, because I'll tell you, when one looks at the position of a member of parliament for Tobago East, you in Parliament, you have very little power.
Okay.
You have a platform where you could speak, you could make some noise. You know, we've had representatives who've gone down there and made very powerful and strident contributions. We've had Pam Nicholson, we've had Joy Charles, people who've gone into the Parliament and really shaken up things in terms of their contributions. But in terms of power, you have little or no power whatsoever. And you ask yourself, why would Mr. Duke want to put himself in a position where he basically has all the voice and no power?
Okay.
So I tell you, I think the long game is either that he can see where he can parlay that and leverage it to ensure that he gets to be the ultimate leader of government of Trinidad and Tobago. And if that is not working out, you will see, I guarantee you, that his anointed successor, who he says Mr. Farley Augustus should be the candidate for Chief Secretary, you will see a switch and you will see Mr. Duke going for Chief Secretary of the THC.
Oh my God, all right.
I guarantee you that.
All right.
Remember I said that on this program.
The 6th of January, right here, 2020, Rise and Shine. All right, when we come back, we go further into, and of course, it's always a wonderful conversation every time Mr. George is here. And of course, we're dealing with Tobago's development. We've got to deal with the leadership, which we've done. And of course, when we come back, there's lots more. So see you immediately after the break.
Look Looking for deckpans? No more trips to Trinidad for deckpans. Richards Hardware is now manufacturing deckpans right here in Tobago. Cut to any length and same-day delivery. We also supply premixed concrete for residential and commercial use. Line pump and boom pump available. Also in stock. Pressure-treated lumber, Bestcrete concrete blocks, hollow clay blocks, BRC, steel, sand, gravel, and all other hardware supply. Corner Milford Road and Orange Hill. Or call us at 310-1289, 635-0169 or 683-8250. We meet all your needs at the lowest prices.
It's beginning to look a lot like the festive season at JG's Furniture and Appliances, Smithfield Trace, Lower Scarborough, and Orange Hill Road. We have washers and dryers, stoves, beds and mattresses, fridge, living and dining room sets, kitchen cupboards, wardrobes, chest of drawers, and so much more. JG's Furniture and Appliances, reasonable prices, excellent service. Call 639-3521 or 635-2341. Open Monday to Saturday. Dealing with the loss of a loved one is never easy. One of the most important decisions you would have to make is choosing a quality funeral service provider that would competently service all of your needs. At Union Funeral Home, we provide the finest professional care for you during your time of need. For more information on all of our services, you can call 639-6577 or visit us at Government House Road, Tobago. Union Funeral Home. We'll be there for you.
Open up to possibility. Memorable moments are only minutes away. It all starts with a Nescafe.
Carry on, carry on. Wind it up, wind it up, wind it up. And when I shake it up, I shake it up, I shake it up. Oh, you like that, yeah. And when you bend it up, you bend it up, you bend it up, you bend it up, I like that.
All right, welcome back. And of course, a very enjoyable conversation about Tobago's development from the business chamber. And of course, the chairman, Mr. Martin, Attorney at Law Martin George, Mr. Martin George. And all right, so we're going to nutshell everything now from a development standpoint. Holistically, Tobago is going forward 2020. Of course, we wait to see the outcome of the election, internal election, and then a general election. We spoke about the possibility of what could happen in the East. And of course, I just want to put the final point that you want to make with that, Watson, and the relation, or let's say that it boils down to 2021. Watson has the one seat. What place can that put Watson to?
Well, it puts him in the best of both worlds, because at the end of the day, you'd have both the PNM and the UNC vying for your attention. Both will be courting you as suitors. Right. So therefore, he will be in a position to call the shots. And I think basically he will sell it to the highest bidder. Whoever it is.
Whoever it is.
In other words, I think the general thinking that persons have out there is that, look, because he has been in opposition to the PNM, that he will naturally go with the UNC. I don't think so. I think he's going to look at it and assess and, okay, what are you offering? What are you offering? And he goes with whichever one gives him the highest. So you may very well see that he joins with the PNM because what they are offering him is better than what the UNC is offering. Because at that stage, basically, you in a free market. So let market forces decide. So the thing is, those who I think within the UNC who may be relaxing in comfort to think, well, okay, if it ends up in that scenario, we are sure to return to government. I think they ought to have some second thoughts as to whether that is a guarantee, because I think anyone in that position, you are going to assess both options, because they will both come running to you, begging you, well, hey, listen, this is what I'm offering. Okay. This is my list of goodies. Yes. This is my list of goodies, and you are in a position to choose. So I don't see it as an automatic that if he wins, if it ends up in that scenario, that he will join forces with the UNC. I don't see it as automatic at all, regardless of what history or whatever arrangements may have been, pre-planned. I see it at that stage.
All right, let's
decision
talk
will be made.
future tense for Tobago's development. Obviously, when you look at what is offered or what is in Scarborough presently, that port mall done by the private sector, I want you to give me a perspective holistically. What should be the vision going forward for politicians? You've made suggestions about tourism in terms of allowing foreign investors. I mean, you travel around the world and you know what foreign investors are. You learn in San Martin, you see Hardware Cafe, you see all those big international companies, business chain. From that standpoint, what you suggest to anyone who is governing this island, what should they do from a business standpoint?
The first and most fundamental thing, have the immediate and unconditional repeal of the Foreign Investment Act. That is I heard Mr. Jack speaking about trying to speed up the process under the Act. What I would ask Mr. Jack to tell the public, from the time of its inception to now, how many land licenses have been granted to foreigners who ended up actually purchasing any land in Tobago. Let him give us those figures, because I'm telling you, it has been a spectacular failure.
Wow.
It has been a spectacular failure. They have been, running people around between the Ministry of Finance, the THA. When you fulfill the requirements of the THA, then the Ministry of Finance says, well, no, we have different requirements. When you go Ministry of Finance, they tell you, well, go back to THA. It has been a nightmare for any investor. Yeah. So as a result, nobody has invested any significant foreign cash into Tobago. We need the immediate and unconditional repeal of that legislation. It has been a disaster for Tobago financially. And I'll tell you, the thinking that was floated at the time when that legislation was introduced was that, well, it's to prevent Tobagonians selling out their lands. And I spoke to the then Chief Secretary, Mr. Orville London, and I told him, I said, that is never going to stop people selling their lands, because all you're going to do is move it from being sold to the foreign investors to being sold to rich Trinidadians who will come and buy up the lands. And that is what exactly has been happening. Right. Very quietly, people have been coming up, they're buying up. So in other words, if you think that that was going to stop people selling out their lands, it has not. Okay? So therefore, we need that to be totally removed. So therefore, you can have now direct foreign investment coming into Tobago. I have had scenarios where clients from the UK have wanted to invest in Tobago, and because of the headaches and stress with this, they've gone to Grenada. Right. And Grenada is now getting a massive injection of foreign cash. In fact, you saw recently Republic Bank itself committed $34 million US to an investment project in Grenada. You look at the sandals in Grenada and look at how that transformed Grenada and in terms of the Grenadian economy. Even the smaller hotels who at first were objecting to sandals because they say, well, look, we can't compete, we're going to suffer. They are the happiest persons now, because you know what? The spillover from sandals, they benefit tremendously.
So we had made an error in getting...
that has always been my position. Okay. The thing is, you see, while we, of course, must preserve our natural environment and our ecosystems, I've always said that it is quite possible to have development and still maintain your ecosystems. In fact, the very site that the sandals were supposed to be, that had already been approved years ago for Angostura through their companies, Occidental Investments Limited, to be able to put up a 5-star hotel or marina on the very same site. So therefore, it's a spurious, specious and speculative argument to therefore come and say, well, look, we objecting to sandals when you didn't object when Angostura had those plans. I have the books, I have all the plans that they had, a golf course, everything they were put in. So therefore, we need to expand our minds as Tobagonians and understand that there's a whole world out there. There's a bigger picture we must always look at. You look at Jamaica, look at where Jamaica has shown tremendous improvement in their sector, their tourism sector. And you know what that has done? It has lifted the entire Jamaican economy. Jamaica is, they're on an upward path so tremendously now. St. Lucia, right? St. Vincent, which has very little to offer. They are also getting very active in the tourism. So Tobago is the only place that is lagging behind. And the thing is, we need to understand that, look, if it is that we want to play on a world stage, because that's what you're competing with, That's what you're competing with. You're competing with Hawaii. You're competing with all the other Caribbean islands. You're competing with Dominican Republic. You know, when you go to Dominican Republic and you go to those hotels, listen, first of all, you can't even walk around the hotel. It is so massive.
Yes.
You have to use a golf cart to get around, right? I've told people, listen, I've been to hotels in Dominican Republic. Just their front lawn alone, you could take the whole of the Trinidad Hilton and drop it on their front lawn.
Great.
The entire hotel could fit on their front lawn.
Wow.
That's to tell you the size of the... So when you're competing with those kinds of things, you're competing with Cuba, because the market in Cuba has opened up, right? Where prices are low, they offer a good product. So therefore, what are we really thinking of? What are we really doing if we want to remain so close-minded and have this, narrow thinking?
The land is so we and we can't develop
That's
it.
right.
We have to break that. All right, Mr. George, and I would hope that you would talk with Nadine Stewart, as you said, and we're expecting that conversation to grow because there's so much you can offer. And I'm really happy to have you. Happy New Year to you and all the best.
Same to you.
All right, it was always a pleasure.
And I always enjoy these discussions whereby we can just stimulate the thinking. It doesn't mean necessarily that what one person says is right or one person says is wrong, but let's expand the ideas so we can develop and grow.
Very good, all right. And when Grover and Prisoner come, we're coming by you to give you a parang.
Definitely.
It could be in March.
Definitely.
All right, then. Thank you, sir.
Care.
And of course, all right, with that, we want to thank you for viewing Rise and Shine. At this point, we want to thank our guests, both, of course, Mr. Joel Jack and, of course, Mr. Martin George. At this point in time, we want to thank you for viewing Rise and Shine. Hey, embrace the urgency of today, for tomorrow is a mystery. Join myself, D. Gemini, inside Cup of Tea. We'll do this again tomorrow. Bye-bye.